We have big news today. Pending UFA, Dougie Hamilton has been given consent to speak with other teams about potential contracts. Could the Colorado Avalanche let captain Gabriel Landeskog walk and go after Jack Eichel? And we'll also have some other signings to discuss today as well. We'll jump into all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some interesting things to talk about today. First up, I just want to jump into some of these quick signings. We have some interesting players here that could be making their NHL debuts this fall. Some interesting signings here, so let's take a look at those here first. Now, one of these contracts is just a re-signing. The Carolina Hurricanes have re-signed left shot defenseman Eric Jelle, who's mostly been a minor league defenseman. He's about 30 years old, spent most of his time in the AHL, but he gets another one-year deal. It's a two-way contract. League minimum at the NHL level, $100,000 at the American Hockey League level. The Boston Bruins have signed an undrafted Swedish free agent. They've got right winger Jesper Froden, 26 years old. He plays the right wing. He's been putting up some pretty solid offensive stats in the Swedish Hockey League and the SHL. So that might be an interesting find there from the Boston Bruins. I mean, there's already a lot of talk about what moves they're going to make this offseason. You know, will Taylor Hall resign? Will Jake DeBrusk get traded? Their wing position, as well as others, are going to have certainly a little bit of movement and some a few changes. So it'd be interesting to see if he can come over and actually make the team and have any kind of an impact. But at this point, it's an undrafted free agent signing, so certainly no risk, and it's only a one-year deal, so there's no harm in that. And we also have another interesting signing here as well. Blue Jackets have signed forward Gregory Hoffman, who's from the Swiss League. Now, he's 28 years old. He was drafted. He was drafted by the Carolina Hurricanes back in 2011, so 10 years ago when he was first eligible, but never ended up signing or playing anywhere in the NHL. He's been playing in the National League in Switzerland for some time and putting up some really solid offensive stats. This past year, for example, he was more than a point per game player. So obviously the Jackets, in my opinion, what we've seen from them recently with the talk about a Seth Jones trade, we saw the Tortorella leave, Brad Larson take over as a head coach. So, when they went, it was an in-house hiring with a brand new head coach. To me, I think this team is heading more towards a rebuild. So a guy like him should get a pretty decent opportunity, but could be an interesting player to see what kind of impact he can have upon making the jump over to North America. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have some pretty significant news today from NHL insider Elliotte Friedman, who let us know that the Carolina Hurricanes have granted permission to Dougie Hamilton and his agent to speak with other teams on a potential contract, and that would give them the option and opportunity to maybe do a sign and trade so that the Carolina Hurricanes could actually recoup something here instead of losing Hamilton to free agency for nothing. Now, I'd reported before that Friedman was pretty confident that Hamilton may not return to the Hurricanes. So the negotiations had not gone well on a new contract. They were a long ways apart. I would think it's fair to say, based on the stats that Hamilton's been putting up, that he's probably looking at least a $7 to $8 million contract. And the Hurricanes don't appear to want to pay anywhere near that. Now, I'm not sure exactly what they're offering. I can't really put a ballpark on it, but obviously they're significantly less than many feel. If he hits the open market, he's going to command a lot more money than the Hurricanes are willing to pony up. So obviously this makes sense, even though from a Carolina standpoint, if you're a Canes fan, and if you're disappointed by this news, I completely understand. It obviously looks like there's time coming to an end, is very likely, but I wouldn't completely rule out a return. However, like I said, he might get on there and talk to other teams, find out what some of them are willing to offer ahead of free agency, and then maybe he'll be able to circle back to Carolina and say, okay, maybe what you're offering isn't that bad, and it's been a good fit, and I want to stay. But many believe this is really Hamilton's main opportunity to really get paid, and that he's going to be taking, kind of the best situation from a financial standpoint. He's still young enough that he could probably win in just about any market, but at the same time, the Canes are a team that's had a really, really solid year and are expected to be a team who can compete for the playoffs and Stanley Cups for a while, but they do have some big question marks hanging over this franchise right now. Hamilton is one of them, but I mean, the coaching staff is another. It's hard to imagine some of the changes that could be made with this franchise this offseason. That's a lot of it could be boiled down to the dollars and cents here. So it'll be interesting to be seeing what happens. But like I said, I mean, free agency is still over a month away. So the fact that they're letting him speak to teams now goes to show you their thoughts on the process, their thoughts on where they're at in negotiations. That's not a good sign at all. So clearly they're more interested in trying to do a sign and trade to get something back if they're going to lose him for nothing. So what I've done is I've gone through the NHL teams and taken a look at who might be the most interested players when it comes to Hamilton services. I know I've already come across a few articles today since that news came out this morning, speculating on what teams might be the best fits or might be the most interested. We'll have to wait and see as NHL insiders gather more intel here in the coming days once he is able to have some meetings and discussions with other NHL franchises. But there's certainly, a handful that I kind of pegged as being really in need of a guy like him. Doesn't mean that that's where he's going to go, but it just means that it's a good opportunity for him and the team to have a good fit in teams that could likely afford to pony up. Like, for example, you get the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, I know they have Seth Jones today, but Seth Jones is a guy who's rumored to be traded. So if he's not going to re-sign there, they could replace Jones with a guy like Hamilton, be a top pair guy with Werenski, and they may not miss a beat. Now, of course, I think, as I mentioned previously, I think the Jackets might be more heading down the road of a rebuild, so they may not be interested in that. They might trade Jones for more of a younger, future-based package, and they might be, willing to kind of sit this one out. So they may not want Hamilton. I don't know, but theoretically, if they decide they want to keep kind of trying to make the playoffs and don't really want to go down that rebuild stage, if he's willing to go to the Jackets, then you know what? He could be on a new deal, what Seth Jones might be wanting to pass up and go to another team. So clearly, Columbus could be players. That's just a little bit of speculation on my part. A team like the Flyers would desperately need a guy like Hamilton. They really need a top right shot D. So Philly's an excellent landing spot. The Philadelphia Flyers also have a good amount of draft picks and younger players that would be of interest to the Hurricanes, because if the Carolina Hurricanes don't want to pay Hamilton this big amount, they might be wanting something in return that's going to be lower salary. They may not want to take a lot of money back. The Flyers do have some defensemen. I don't think they would want Gostisbehere, at least I wouldn't think. But they have some younger players like a Morgan Frost or maybe even Travis Konecny's name has been out there, which surprises me a little bit. But anyways, like, there might be something to that effect on a Flyers roster that would certainly interest the Hurricanes. Now, I'm not sure what kind of return you're going to get, because we don't really see sign and trade deals in the NHL very often. I would suspect that it's not going to be a massive return like you might think. Essentially, the main purpose is to get that extra year in. You can do the 8-year contract and then have it traded rather than only be able to do 7. So that's the main advantage. Otherwise, the guy could walk into free agency and sign with this team for nothing. So I don't imagine that the return will be as huge as you would think otherwise. But certainly look to a team like the Ottawa Senators. The Ottawa's a team that is certainly looking to come out from this rebuild and challenge for playoffs next year. I don't know if they'll be a playoff team for sure or not, but I think they'll at least be in the conversation. And they're a team that really needs a right shot defenseman. Dougie Hamilton, to partner with Thomas Chabot, that's what they really need back there. That would be absolutely huge. Hamilton and Chabot would make up one of the better D pairings in the league, and that would really take that team a long way. Now, does the Senators want to have another contract comparable to Chabot's on the books? I don't know. So clearly, that's a question mark, and I don't know what they would feel about that. But at the same time, it'd be an excellent landing spot for Hamilton in that regard. And a young, up-and-coming team that's got a ton of great young talent that really showed at the end of this past season that they're a team who can be in the mix. That might be a good spot too. Obviously, you get the team like the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, the Maple Leafs could really use some help on the right side of their blue line. Obviously, their left side, to me, is getting a little bit crowded. And a guy like Morgan Rielly, I've been saying it all along, I will not be surprised one bit if Rielly is traded rather than be extended this year. They've already got TJ Brody, Jake Muzzin, Rasmus Sandin on that left side. To me, Sandin can do the job that Rielly used to do. He's younger, cheaper, and just as effective, at least when it comes to the offensive capabilities. At least that's in my opinion. I mean, obviously Rielly's more experienced, so there is a gap there, but Sandin can get there, I have no doubt. So on the right side, having a guy like Hamilton would be tremendous for Toronto. Now, if you take away the Morgan Rielly contract off the books, that's still might be difficult for the Leafs to swallow another contract that's up around $7-8 million. But I'm just saying it would be a good fit. I mean, they're at with their team to have another right shot D. The capabilities and size of Dougie Hamilton would be huge. But again, challenging nonetheless. Now, many feel the Avs are another big defenseman away from really being able to truly compete with teams like Vegas and make a more solid run at the Stanley Cup. And obviously, there's talk about a guy like maybe Samuel Girard possibly being up for grabs here as well. Now, of course, if this kind of deal were to go down, it might be more likely to happen after the expansion draft. I don't know, because the Avalanche are going to have protection issues when it comes to their blue line. And if they move out a guy like Girard and bring in a guy like Hamilton, it's not going to change any. Obviously, they would protect Hamilton after making the acquisition, but to have Hamilton and Makar on your right side, that's an insane blue line. I mean, obviously a guy like Girard, I know, plays the other side, but he struggled mightily in the playoffs, and there's talk that he could be like the sacrificial lamb to improve other areas of the team. But a lot of people were talking about Seth Jones going to the Avalanche and that maybe being the piece that they really need. So obviously maybe Hamilton could be that guy. I don't know. I'm not really convinced that he's exactly what they need, but certainly would not be a bad idea if they could add him. But at the same time, I think that would be complicated for them to pull that off. Another team as well will be a team like the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, the Blackhawks are a team that still has some veteran guys there, but for the most part, it's starting to, the roster's turning over to a younger roster, or at least slowly getting there. They still have guys like Kane and Taves around, Duncan Keith, but they could offer up maybe one of their younger defensemen that obviously would help the Hurricanes down the road. Maybe they move either like Boqvist or Mitchell or one of those guys go. I'm not sure exactly what it would take to get this deal done, but Chicago would be a very interesting landing spot for Hamilton as well. To me, like, there's some of the top teams that I just went through here around the NHL that would really make things interesting and could really use a guy like him for his services. Whether or not they're willing to pony up the money that he's looking for and at the same time give up some assets to get the deal done ahead of free agency remains to be seen. But Dougie Hamilton appears to be done in Carolina unless the market just turns out to be really soft for him and he comes back and says, yeah, you know what? I'll stay and take the whatever which I just don't see happening. I mean, teams are going to line up to pay this guy. He's had a tremendous season. He's a big, tall, good-sized, right-shot, rangy defenseman. To me, he's going to be an attractive asset for teams out there looking to make a move and upgrade that blue line. Now, before we jump into the final segment of the video today, I just want to take a minute here and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping into all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. Thanks very much for taking the time to watch that promotional video. I appreciate it. Now, of course, moving back into today's content, I also want to take a look at the Colorado Avalanche a little bit deeper here. Now, I know I mentioned the Avs as being one of the teams that might be a good fit for Hamilton, but ultimately, I don't think that's a very likely scenario. But I do want to review an article I came across from the Denver Post who had a variety of writers kind of contributing to this. The article was kind of like a roundtable discussion where they asked some top questions facing the Avalanche this offseason. And some of the things they were covering I found a little bit surprising and interesting to discuss. So I wanted to bring it here to the channel and see what our viewers thought. So one of the big hot topics here was Gabriel Landeskog and the fact that he did not have a good series against the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, of course, the captain is a pending unrestricted free agent. Normally, you don't see that happen. So I'm not sure exactly where negotiations were at prior to the season. I'm sure they at least held some conversations. But normally, you don't really see some of these guys make it to free agency, but we've seen more of it happen this year than we've seen in recent past. Like Alex Ovechkin's there, you get Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, you have Dougie Hamilton that we just talked about. Obviously got a guy like Landeskog, a captain of the Avalanche. So clearly the team must be reasonably content. I would think, based on this, though, that the team would be fairly confident they're going to get him signed. You would think they wouldn't let it go that far if that wasn't the case, right? I mean, Landeskog's going to be 29 when next season gets underway. He's got a young family. He's been there his entire career, which spans about a decade now. Obviously, he's been the captain for a long time. Like, they made him captain at a really young age, but he was always a very mature hockey player and a guy who can go to battle with you. Like, Landeskog's a warrior out there on the ice. And I was surprised to see the writers in the Denver Post article really kind of tearing him to shreds, saying he disappeared in the series against the Vegas Golden Knights, and that maybe they should let him walk, or they should offer him like a lowball contract, a take it or leave it offer for their captain at like maybe $5 million or slightly less than what he's getting paid now. And to say that's the most we're willing to go, and if you don't want to take that, then I guess you can move on. I found that very surprising. Now, they also felt that, obviously adding other areas of the team would be beneficial, like going after Jack Eichel out of Buffalo. Now, clearly they said having McKinnon, Eichel, 1-2 down the middle would create a two-headed monster that would certainly, create problems for other teams to get them more favorable matchups, that they could certainly have more success in some of these, hard-fought playoff series. And you know what? Having Jack Eichel as your number 2 center behind Nathan McKinnon would be a really scary thought, and that's an incredibly, good idea. However, you probably would have to let Landeskog go in order to make the room money-wise, depending on what you trade to the Sabres to take Eichel on, because he makes $10 million. So, to me, I don't know. Like, do you have a guy like Landeskog who's been there for a decade, he's been an absolute stud and a warrior for you, putting up tremendous stats? Yeah, you know what? He had a bad series, but I don't think you can put all the blame on him. I mean, they were up 2-0, and they lost 4 games in a row. That's a team effort out there. He's not the only one that struggled, and you got to remember, there's a team on the other side that's stopping them and, making sure that they don't have success. So, I don't know. To me, I'm not sure that you really let your captain walk for that, or you make him like an insulting lowball offer to kind of either get him for cheap or encourage him to walk. It was quite surprising to see the local media, really having these serious discussions in this article. But, do you think that's something that the Avalanche should do? They do have the assets that would probably be interesting to the Buffalo Sabres in terms of a trade. Now, I'm not sure exactly what it's going to take to make Buffalo be interested, but they could certainly offer up one of their young defensemen. Like I mentioned before, they're going to have expansion draft issues. A guy like Samuel Girard, for example, or Ryan Graves would be, the guys they're going to lose in expansion. Like, I would think that normally going into the season, we figured, obviously that Eric Johnson's expected to waive his no-move clause so that he can be exposed, and it likely won't be taken given his injury, past and his contract. So probably not going to happen. And then you've got Cale Makar, you got Samuel Girard, you got Devon Toews, and you've got Ryan Graves that are all kind of important back there, but obviously you can't protect them all. So at the end of the day here, if you make a trade and get Eichel, that's a whole new dynamic. Now, of course, like I said, a defenseman would likely have to be included. I don't know what else. I mean, they do have some other interesting young talent. Their other top prospects would include a D like Bowen Byram, but I would assume Byram was the guy they wouldn't want to trade. They just got Alex Newhook on their roster here recently after getting him signed out of college. I wouldn't think they'd want to trade Newhook, but I don't know. They do have some other younger players like Martin Kaut, Shane Bowers. I'm not sure how the Sabres would feel about them. And obviously they have some other players on their roster that might be of interest. They'd probably be willing to part with guys like Burakovsky or Donskoy. Maybe JT Compher. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to take. You could throw in some draft picks. But obviously the Avalanche could make a play for Eichel. But what are your thoughts on this whole scenario? Does the Avalanche become a better team by letting Landeskog walk and essentially taking that money and putting together some assets to acquire Jack Eichel and create a two-headed monster down the middle with McKinnon and Eichel, instead of having your big three that you have right now with McKinnon, Rantanen, and Landeskog? I mean, he's your team captain. He plays hard. He's a warrior out there. I don't see it happening myself. I see them signing Landeskog as much as the thought of having Eichel makes sense and is a good thought. I don't know that you go down that road. He's a guy dealing with a lot of injuries, and if the guy you're losing is pretty important too. So I just don't know what's best here. I don't know what your thoughts are, and what do you think the Avalanche should do in the comments. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.